My parents worshipped my sister and treated me like a ghost, but Grandma made me the heir. Now they're begging for forgiveness, and I know it's all a lie. I was raised in what most people would describe as a typical middle-class household: 2 parents, a younger sister, and a small suburban home. To outsiders, we seemed like the picture-perfect family. But anyone close to us would tell you there was always tension between my parents and me. The reason was simple: they adored my younger sister, Emma, and I was always the afterthought. But that wasn't always the case. I remember when we were younger, my parents were very loving and caring toward both Emma and me. They showered us with affection, and why wouldn't they? We were a pretty smart pair, excelling at everything we tried. We had that golden period where nothing seemed to divide us. Both Emma and I were enrolled in piano lessons, art classes, and gymnastics, and our parents were equally proud of us. I never felt any tension back then. There was no subtle preference for one of us over the other. But things changed when I hit 6th grade. It all started with just one test. It wasn't even a particularly important one, but I got a bad grade. It was the first bad grade of my life, but it was enough for my parents to start seeing me differently. I could tell something had shifted when my mother wouldn't look at me the same way she did Emma, who brought home yet another perfect score. The compliments they once gave me started to feel obligatory, while Emma's successes were celebrated with genuine pride. Suddenly, I was the loose string that could come undone at any moment, and Emma was the one who could do no wrong. At first, I thought it was just a phase. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But it became impossible to ignore. If I made a mistake, no matter how small, it was held against me. If Emma made a mistake, it was brushed off, or worse, excused. "She's just having an off day," my father would say, while for me it was always, "Why can't you be more like Emma?" That phrase haunted me throughout my teenage years. As we grew older, Emma blossomed into everything my parents had ever wanted in a daughter. She was smart, popular, and outgoing. She was the class president, the homecoming queen, the girl everyone liked. I, on the other hand, became more introverted. I kept to myself, studied hard, and excelled in my own way, but it was never enough to compete with Emma. And soon enough, I stopped trying. By the time we were in high school, the differences in how we were treated had become glaringly obvious. Emma always got new clothes, her own car, and all the attention. When she needed help with homework, our parents would sit with her for hours, making sure she understood every detail. If I asked for help, it was either too late in the evening, or they'd brush me off, telling me to figure it out on my own. They had started treating me like an adult while coddling Emma like a princess. I learned early on that if I wanted something, I'd have to work for it, while Emma had everything handed to her on a silver platter. Despite the imbalance in treatment, I tried to keep a relationship with Emma. After all, she was my sister, and I loved her. But it became harder and harder to ignore her growing sense of entitlement. She seemed to revel in the attention, knowing she could get away with anything. It wasn't just my parents who adored her; our friends, teachers, and even strangers were captivated by her charm. She was the golden girl, and I was the shadow in the background. I began to wonder if anyone really saw me for who I was, or if I was just Emma's sister. The turning point came one summer after I graduated from high school. I had been accepted to a decent college on a partial scholarship, and I was excited to finally get out of the house and start fresh. I thought maybe, with some distance, my relationship with my parents would improve, and that they would finally miss me when I was gone. I thought wrong. It was around this time that Emma started dating a boy named Jake, the star quarterback of our high school football team. He was handsome, popular, and came from a wealthy family. My parents loved him, of course. They treated him like the son they never had. Every weekend, Jake was over at our house, and my parents would cook elaborate dinners just to impress him. It was clear they were already envisioning a future where Emma and Jake would get married, settle down, and give them the perfect grandchildren. Meanwhile, I was struggling to get through my first semester of college, working part-time to cover the costs my scholarship didn't. I would come home on breaks, exhausted, and all I'd hear about was Emma and Jake's latest outing or how well Emma was doing in her classes. No one asked about me or how I was managing. And to top that all off, they would make snarky remarks like, "Why couldn't I find someone like Jake?" Then came the accusation that would shatter what was left of our family dynamic. One weekend, during a break from college, I came home for a visit. Everything seemed normal until Emma's new bracelet, a gold charm bracelet Jake had given her, went missing. It was an expensive piece, and Emma was distraught. My parents went into full panic mode, tearing the house apart to look for it. When they couldn't find it, Emma suggested that maybe I had taken it. At first, I thought she was joking. But she wasn't. She said she had seen me admiring the bracelet the night before and implied that I might have taken it out of jealousy. I was furious. I hadn't touched her bracelet. I hadn't even thought twice about it. But my parents didn't hesitate. They believed her without question. I protested, of course. I swore I hadn't taken anything. But my parents wouldn't listen. They were convinced I had stolen it out of spite. My father even said something along the lines of, "We always knew you were jealous of Emma." That hurt more than anything they had ever said before. It was like all those years of trying to win their approval, of trying to be a good daughter, had meant nothing. They gave me an ultimatum: return the bracelet or leave the house. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had no proof of my innocence, just my word, but that wasn't enough for them. They had already made up their minds. So, I left. I packed my bags, walked out the door, and didn't look back. I cut all ties with them. I didn't have a choice. I couldn't stay in a house where I was treated like a criminal for something I didn't do. I found a friend to stay with until I could get back on my feet, and that was the last time I spoke to my parents for years. In the years that followed, I struggled. Without my family's support, I had to figure everything out on my own. I juggled school and work, barely scraping by. There were days when I thought I wouldn't make it, but I did. I graduated, found a decent job, and slowly started building a life for myself. Meanwhile, I heard through mutual friends that Emma was thriving. She and Jake were still together, and she had landed a cushy job at some marketing firm my father had helped her get into. It seemed like nothing had changed for them. They were still the perfect family, minus me. 5 years passed before I heard from my family again. I had to build my life from ground zero. The only person to offer me any sort of help and moral support was my grandma, my dad's mother to be exact. Anyways, out of the blue, I received an invitation to my grandmother's Christmas dinner. I was surprised, to say the least. My grandmother had always been the one person in the family who treated me fairly. Even after everything that had happened, she would send me the occasional birthday card or text to check in. But she never brought up my parents or tried to convince me to reconcile with them. So, when I got the invitation, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. But something inside me told me I should. When I arrived at the dinner, it felt like stepping into a time capsule. My parents, Emma, and even Jake were there, along with a few other relatives. The tension was palpable. My parents greeted me stiffly, and Emma acted like nothing had ever happened between us. It was as if they expected me to forget the past and play along with their perfect family act. The night was uncomfortable, but I got through it. Then, toward the end of the evening, my grandmother started handing out gifts. I wasn't expecting anything particularly significant. But when I opened the box, my heart nearly stopped. Inside the box was an old family heirloom, a gold locket, something that had been passed down for generations. It wasn't just any piece of jewelry. Whoever inherited this locket was considered the rightful heir to the family's assets. Grandma had received it from her father, and now, she was passing it directly to me, skipping over her son, my father, and all the other grandchildren, including Emma. It was a symbol of more than just tradition. It meant that one day, everything my grandparents owned, their house, their land, their savings, would be mine. I could see my parents' faces go pale when they realized what had just happened. Emma, who had always been the golden child, sat there in stunned silence. My parents quickly shifted gears, trying to hide their shock with forced smiles, but I could feel the tension in the room. The rest of the dinner was awkward, and soon after, my parents pulled me aside. Suddenly, they were apologetic, as if all those years of neglect and unfair treatment could be washed away with a few kind words. They brought up how Emma might be getting married soon and how they wanted me to be part of the family again, for her sake. But I knew better. This wasn't about family or love. This was about money. The heirloom had always been a big deal in our family, and now that I had it, they knew I would be the one inheriting everything that came with it. They weren't concerned about fixing the relationship because they cared about me, they were worried about what they stood to lose. My father even said, in a tone that felt more like a warning than an offer, that they were willing to forgive me for everything and start fresh. It was as if they had forgotten who had wronged who in the first place. Other relatives chimed in too, urging me to be reasonable. They kept saying that family is everything and that I should be connected with them, no matter what had happened in the past. I could almost hear the clichés lining up: sharing is caring, blood is thicker than water, and you don't want to be alone. Now, even though it's very clear what I should and should not do, all this pressure has got me overthinking this whole scenario. Did I want to be a part of this family again, knowing they only valued me because of what I now possessed? Could I forgive them, knowing that their sudden interest in me was born out of self-interest? Do you guys have any suggestions on this? If yes, I could really use some.